What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MMA meeting. Let's Talk with TheWeasle podcast, where we talk all things MMA. Hope you guys have an amazing day, and time to recap a little bit of that UFC 295 card, which even in hindsight now, a couple days removed from it, it's one of the best cards of the year in my opinion. It was so fun. Good fights on the prelims and early prelims, but the main card really shined. Every single fight ended by knockout, which is great. Those fighters are very nice for not keeping us up too long. I really appreciate that. But I did go over on social media and try to see some of your guys' observations, like unique observations of the main event especially. And I saw three. I did see some people try to say that Alex Pereira at 205 has slowed down a bit. He's not as aggressive as he used to be at 185. This is in fact true. So far, both of his fights at 205 have been a slower pace than what we saw at 185. He's not been as aggressive as he was before. And some of you guys don't like that. You don't like a slower style from Pereira, but you have to ask why that is. Why did we see his approach be slower at 205 compared to 185? Well, I think there's a couple reasons here. Well, a big reason as to why is because he didn't get to play the sponsor for today's video, Raid Shadow Legends, one of the best mobile games out there with over 800 champions, intense and fun boss battles, and deep tactical gameplay. Raid Shadow Legends is not only just a great game, it's a great time between fights during the commercial breaks, and they got something new for you. If you're familiar with the game Kiss, Marry, Kill, well, Raid is allowing you to look through 800 champions and find 3 worthy candidates for this choice. Highly recommend you guys to pick legendary or epic champions, more so legendary of course, as they are better than the lower ranked champs. And for me, I had to pick Venus, Gentoro, and Gagurab. I think they look pretty cool, and they are pretty strong. And Raid's latest update is allowing you to customize yours or your clan's logo, just to show off a bit. And for this month, there's going to be Prime Gaming drops in-game, so Amazon Prime members can earn themselves some special rewards, like the champion Boran Jiri, with all this exciting stuff. If you haven't played yet, click the link in the description below or scan my QR code on screen right here to get even more bonuses available only through my link. I'm talking about the epic champion Drake, very strong champion, and other useful things like energy refills, skill tomes, XP boosters, worth $30, but you get it for free. Just click the link in the description below and you will get these bonuses. And you can find your bonuses right over here. Well, there are a few reasons here. Number one, the last fight he had at 185 was a KO loss. The only knockout loss of his entire professional combat sports career. He's been TKO'd in kickboxing, but he's never been KO'd the way Adesanya finished him in their second MMA fight. And that was the last fight at 185 for him, so he went up to 205 right after that. So it's reasonable to think that he would slow down a little bit for that not to happen again. You know, when you get knocked out for the first time unconscious, it can change your approach right away. So that's one of the reasons. Number two, I do think it could be situational. You have to look at the 2 opponents he went up against at 205. He went up against Jan Blachowicz, who he and everybody knew was going to test the grappling. He was going to try to take Pereira to the ground, and for the first time in Pereira's UFC career, he went up against a big, strong, decent grappler, and he did not want to give those kind of openings to the big Polish man. It still kind of went that way. He still did get taken to the ground, but he was being measured the whole time against the grappler here. And when Jan shot early in the fight, it confirmed to Pereira, this is going to be the game plan, so I really have to be mindful on what I do out here so I don't get repeatedly taken down. Also, the fight was in Salt Lake City, high elevation. He believed in his cardio against Jan, and Jan gassed out in the fight, showing he knew exactly what he was doing. Now, Jiri Prochazka was the other opponent. The guy's very awkward. He's unpredictable. He wanted to keep things as simple as possible and not expose himself to someone like Jiri, right? And when I knew exactly that he wanted to slow down the pace and allow Jiri to open himself up, because Jiri will do that, right? Jiri will expose himself defensively by himself. That's the kind of fighter that he is. Pereira in that fight was also not putting too much pressure. Not nearly as much pressure as he's used to putting on opponents. He put even more pressure on Jan Blachowicz than he did against Jiri Prochazka. How many times did we see Pereira move away from Jiri the whole fight? Many, many times. This confirmed to me exactly what his strategy was all about, because Pereira doesn't usually fight that way. It was a unique, specific game plan to be slower in this fight and allow Jiri to expose himself. But you do have to also look at it from both fighters' perspectives. It wasn't just Pereira that wasn't as aggressive in that fight. It was also Jiri. Yes, Jiri was aggressive, but not nearly as aggressive as we've seen him in his other 3 fights in the UFC. There were a lot of moments where Jiri was trying to pick out his own openings and not push too much of a pace against Pereira, like he did against Volkan, Dominic Reyes, Glover Teixeira. He went crazy against those guys, but he knew the danger that Pereira presented in front of him. And also coming back from the shoulder injury may have played into him being more methodical than usual, right? We've never seen Jiri in the UFC that methodical and patient. So both guys understood the level of danger in front of each other. But even still with Pereira's slower approach, he still knocked him out early in the fight. It was in the second round, so it clearly paid off for him. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He executed it perfectly. Jiri opened himself up, and Pereira countered him just like he wanted to the whole fight, just like he was looking for. And there was that moment where Pereira backed up to the cage, and Jiri was standing in front of him, but Jiri wasn't throwing too much, right? Jiri was very patient in trying to actually feint out some of Pereira's attacks. What did Pereira do in that moment? He was throwing more power punches there than he was in the center of the cage. He was clearly looking for that counter shot, but in that early moment, Jiri didn't give him that opening. It was until the finishing sequence where he did. So that's a pretty interesting observation some people were making. The other one was, which I touched on briefly, why didn't Jiri Prochazka attempt more takedowns? He shot one time in the fight, and it worked. So with a successful takedown, why didn't he go back to it in the second round? I touched on that briefly in my breakdown, and it is kind of confusing, but what I believe it was, Jiri Prochazka was a victim of his own success. He was doing better on the feet than he probably even expected. Jiri was landing some good shots on Pereira, especially before the finishing sequence where he blitzed him down before throwing the naked right overhand that caused him to get knocked out. He hit Pereira with a couple shots there, believed in himself at that point, and got way overconfident. So him being a victim of his own success in the stand-up, I believe did cost him a bit. And the other thing was, when we go back to what Jiri said before the fight, Jiri was talking about Alex Pereira not being a quote-unquote great martial artist. He elaborated, and what he said was, he's not saying Alex is a bad fighter. He just said Alex is not a well-rounded martial artist, which is in fact true. He's developing his grappling, he's developing his wrestling, but he's still not at like an elite level, right? He's a champion of the division, and his grappling is nowhere near that level. So many people are interpreting that in like the worst way possible. But another thing that Jiri did say was he wanted to test his striking against Alex Pereira. He believed that he could outstrike him. That is a mistake. And I believe that's what he actually tried to do in the fight, especially in the second round. That may be another reason as to why, being successful in some moments in the stand-up, he did try to outstrike Alex Pereira and paid for it. There were many moments where he could have attempted another takedown, but he did not go to it in the second round. Now, the third observation I saw was mostly by Chael, but there are some people who do share the same thing. This one's kind of weird. Has not gotten better since his UFC debut. This is the only one that I believe is kind of laughable. Right? If it's being said seriously, because like, how could anybody watch Pereira's UFC career so far and say that he hasn't gotten better at all throughout this journey? This alone debunks that completely. Israel Adesanya put Alex Pereira in worse positions on the ground than Jiri Prochazka did. That right there is enough to tell you that Pereira got better. Because Adesanya is nowhere near the grappler that Jiri is. Jiri's the guy that submitted Glover Teixeira. You know what Glover Teixeira would do to Adesanya on the ground? He would sun him, right? He would dog him all day. And Jiri not only grappled with him back and forth a bit, but even submitted that guy. One of the greatest submission artists in light heavyweight history. Pereira was on the ground with Jiri, not in a good position. He was on his back. Jiri got half guard, but Jiri could not transition out of that position. Adesanya nearly got Pereira's back, which is crazy. That right there shows somewhat of a progression, right? Pereira got better somewhat between the first Adesanya fight and the Jiri Prochazka fight, which is like 3 fights apart. And not only that, even in his UFC debut, he got taken down by Andreas Michailidis. He got taken down like twice in the fight, if I remember correctly, but Alex did get up after each takedown. Obviously, he knocked him out. But he defended a couple takedowns against Jan Blachowicz, even in the first round before Jan got tired. So obviously, Alex Pereira has gotten better, specifically in his grappling and wrestling defense. I mean, the guy survived with Jan on his back, which nobody thought would ever happen. If Jan ever got his back, everybody would have thought before that fight that Pereira's done for. There's no way, right? But he defended it. He defended the rear naked chokes. He got out of the first round. The only place that Alex probably didn't get too much better is maybe his striking. It's already elite as it is. He's arguably the greatest striker in UFC history. Doesn't need to get better. He's already been doing that for his whole life. It's hard to get that much better at this point of his career. He's reached a level that 99% of the fighters in the world will never get to. And then moving into the co-main event, I'm very happy about the heavyweight division, man. Not only heavyweight, light heavyweight's amazing too right now. It's only the middleweight division looks kind of weakish, but with a new champion in Sean Strickland, Drick is doing very well. Hamza Chimaev in the division, and some other good fighters rising up. like Anthony Hernandez and Brendan Allen. Roman Dolidze can possibly do some interesting things. I would say at this point, every division is pretty good. For a long time, the light heavyweight division and the heavyweight division were very lackluster. But I think they're so much better now. Light heavyweight's better than it's been in the last, how many years? You have Pereira's champ, you have Jamahal Hill, Jiri Prochazka, Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz, Alexander Rakic, who's back now, Nikita Krylov is in his prime, Johnny Walker is better than he's ever been. Then it kind of dips off after that, but the top 8 fighters can be somewhat competitive and are very fun fighters to watch. In the heavyweight division, we have Jon Jones as champ, Tom Aspinall as interim champ, then we have Ciryl Gane, Sergei Pavlovich, Stipe, he's going to retire, Curtis Blades, Alexander Volkov's doing very well, Jailton Almeida is number 7, then it falls off after that. And that's the top 8 fighters. Just like the heavyweight division, the heavyweight division's top 8 are quite interesting right now. Dare I say, light heavyweight and heavyweight are better than the middleweight division overall, outside of a few fighters, of course, like Strickland and Dricus and Whitaker and Cannonier and Hamza, maybe. What else do you got in middleweight that rivals light heavy and heavy? Paulo Costa? Roman Dolidze? Vittori? I think these 3 are kind of around the same level. Jack Hermanson, Brendan Allen, Kelvin. I honestly think 205 and heavyweight have surpassed the middleweight division and are not too far away from welterweight. Or am I going too far there? Because welterweight, you got Leon, Usman. Oh yeah, if Usman's at middleweight, that's pretty good too. So at welterweight, you got Leon, Bilal, Colby, Gilbert, Shavkat, Wonderboy, Jeff Neal, and then I think it falls off a bit after that with Luque. Sean Brady could do some interesting things, so can Ian Gary, of course. Ian Gary's a good rising contender. Jack Della Maddalena might be able to do some interesting things. Kevin Holland's fun to watch. Not an amazing fighter, but, entertaining. Then you have Neil Magny, Michael Chiesa, and Renat. So I would say heavyweight, 205, and 170 are quite close to each other. But Tom Aspinall is finally an interim champion that makes a lot of sense. For the past few years, there's been a lot of illegitimate interim title fights. Tom Aspinall for Sergei Pavlovich was a legitimate interim title fight because we don't know the next time Jones is going to fight. And when he does return, whenever that is, he's not going to fight them. He's going to fight Stipe. Aspinall's going to defend his belt, his interim title, before Jon Jones does. And I do expect Jones to retire after he beats Stipe. I believe that when he was healthy. The fact that he got a horrific injury like he did, his chest got torn off his shoulder, that told me right away, okay, there's no chance this guy comes back after Stipe. He has so much wear and tear on his body. His body may be breaking apart now. He's been doing it for so long. He's not old per se for a heavyweight, where he's like 35, 36. But how long he's been fighting, especially at the top level, 5-round fights consistently throughout 7+ years? His body has to be breaking apart. And with his injury, it does seem like it. And heavier bodies, right? He's training and sparring with heavyweights at a consistent basis now. He's been doing that before, but now it's a lot more focused. It's a lot more focused on the bigger guys. Injuries are going to be a lot more prevalent, right? Injuries are going to happen way more now. We could even see Tom Aspinall defend his belt twice before Jon Jones comes back. It reminds me a bit of Renan Barão when he was the interim champ defending his belt during Cruz's plague of injuries. And I do believe he defended his interim belt twice, which is what seems like Aspinall might be able to do as well. And Tom Aspinall is saying that he wants to fight in UFC 300, which is a few months away, right? It's not that long from now. And if he does fight at UFC 300, it's going to be against Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane is the next guy up. If Aspinall defends his belt once, if not even 2 times, people are going to look at him as the legitimate undisputed champion over Jones. If he defends his belt, wins that fight against Ciryl Gane or whoever it is, people are going to be looking at Tom Aspinall as the real champion of the heavyweight division, especially knowing the fact that Jon Jones hinted that he doesn't want to fight these guys, right? Aspinall, of course, wants to fight Jones, but Jones seems like he doesn't want to fight Aspinall. He just wants to fight Stipe. So I'm calling it right here. If Aspinall defends his interim title, people are going to be looking at him as the real undisputed champion. Now, he has to fight Ciryl Gane next. That's the next opponent. It's either him or Jailton Almeida, but Jailton Almeida is number 7, and he just beat Derek Lewis with a very boring performance. At least Ciryl Gane destroyed Sergei Spivak. So you have to give it to Ciryl Gane. This guy's getting a bunch of title fights, man. How many times does Ciryl Gane get a title shot in the last 2 years? So he got an interim title shot when he fought Derek Lewis in August of 2021. Then he got an undisputed title shot when he fought Francis Ngannou. Then he got another undisputed title shot when he fought Jon Jones. And now he might get a 4th title shot against Tom Aspinall in a span of like 2.5 years. He's just that good, and nobody else is rising to the same occasion. It was Sergei Pavlovich, right? Sergei was supposed to be the next guy. He was the backup fighter for Jon Jones and Stipe. But now that he got knocked out in the first round by Tom Aspinall, he's going to have to fight someone else. Stipe is the next contender. He's fighting Jon Jones. Curtis Blaydes might still be out with an injury. And even that, he got knocked out by Sergey. Alexander Volkov's on a good win, but he's number 6. Do you give Volkov an interim title shot? I think it has to be Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane's not only the number 2 contender, but he's also like the biggest name out of these other guys. He's a bigger name than Volkov. He's a bigger name than Almeida. He's a bigger name than Blaydes. He's a high-ranked fighter. And I think it's a more interesting fight. Ciryl Gane is the best striker in the heavyweight division. He just doesn't have much grappling as to what we've seen so far. Maybe he's gotten better. Hopefully he's gotten better. So far, so good with the Spivak performance, but Spivak's not really a shooter the way Tom Aspinall is. Aspinall's going to shoot at you with powerful double legs. He's a big, fast guy. The only fighter in this weight class that can match Ciryl Gane's speed. That's a very interesting one. And it's a good fight for Aspinall, especially stylistically. Ciryl Gane, I believe, is a better fight for Aspinall than Curtis Blaydes, Volkov. Volkov already fought Aspinall and he got submitted in the first round, right? So Ciryl Gane's a better stylistic fight than Curtis Blaydes is, right? Curtis Blaydes is a harder guy to take to the ground. He's for sure the better wrestler of the two, and he could strike somewhat, right? He's an athletic big guy as well. Jailton Almeida is a grappler, right? So maybe Tom Aspinall could outstrike him, but Almeida's a very fast heavyweight too, given that he's light though, right? It's not as impressive as like Aspinall or Gane, because Almeida weighs like 100 pounds, you know what I'm saying? He weighs like 230, whereas Ciryl Gane and Tom Aspinall are like 250 and up, right? They have like 20, 30 pounds on that guy. So of course, Almeida's supposed to be fast, whereas Tom Aspinall, on the other hand, 260, 6'5", moving like that, that's crazy. I do think though, Tom Aspinall right now is the best heavyweight on the planet. When I say best, not like he's accomplished more than anybody else. Of course, that's still Stipe, but who can beat him? That sort of thing. I think he beats Ciryl Gane. I think he takes him down and submits him. I think he beats Sergey in a rematch. Sergey might be like one of the most dangerous opponents, even still, because he could knock out Aspinall. He could. But I do favor Aspinall in the rematch. I think he would put Stipe back at the fire department for good. If Stipe ever fought Tom Aspinall, it would be like, all right, why am I doing this? He would put him instantly into retirement. Curtis Blaydes could be a good fight, but he's not as good of a striker as Aspinall is. Even if the takedowns get neutralized, Aspinall is going to outpunch this guy. Volkov gets taken to the ground. Almeida gets beat up on the feet, and he's much, much smaller too. And then we have Jon Jones, right? Jon Jones is obviously the hardest matchup, but I do think, especially now that we know that Jones has that injury, we know his body's kind of breaking apart. He's been in the game for so long. I think Aspinall would beat him if they fought each other. The only heavyweight across the globe, I think if Aspinall fought Jon Jones, Aspinall's boxing would completely demoralize Jones' ability to punch with him. Is it crazy to say that he's faster than Jones too? He'll be able to get in and out, land the 1-2, put the jab on him, land some good leg kicks here and there. Jones would have to kick Aspinall back to slow down the footwork a bit and also test Aspinall's cardio. That's the one area we don't know too much about. Aspinall's never gone past the second round. So if Jones can slow down in the first 2, allow Aspinall to work, kicking at his legs and body, throw some good body punches in there, clinch up with Aspinall, use the Muay Thai clinch, land knees to the body, try to take him down whenever the opening presents itself. I think that would be Jones' path to victory against Aspinall. But at the end of the day, let's say Aspinall does have good cardio. There's too much power, too much speed. The damage would add up. He could defend the takedowns. He's very good in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. If he gets on his back, he might be able to stand up faster than some of these other heavyweights. And I think if he lands a good 1-2 on Jon Jones, this fight can definitely be in his favor here. Just one combination and Jones could get stunned. Now imagine multiple of those combos landing on him. I do like Tom Aspinall in this fight with Jon Jones, but it's unfortunate as it seems like they'll never fight each other. That I think would beat Aspinall is Francis Ngannou. I don't think there's a heavyweight on this planet in MMA that can beat Ngannou right now. I don't think Jones does. I've held that opinion for many, many years, and it has not changed whatsoever. I think Francis Ngannou beats Jones. I think he beats Aspinall. I think he beats Gane again, especially knowing that he was injured badly in their fight. He would knock out Sergey. He would knock out Stipe again. He would knock out Blaydes, Volkov, Almeida. All these guys would be victims to the Predator. And I'm not talking about a certain high-definition fighter. And now that Ngannou's boxing is getting better, good luck to anybody who fights that guy. But does he go down the counter path? Does he get too encapsulated with the boxing? Right? He becomes too much of a boxer? It's heavyweight. He could do that. I don't think so, honestly. I think returning to MMA, Ngannou is going to prove to be than what we saw before. His takedown defense is very good. He's a very smart guy. He understands where he needs to be. He understands his situations. He's very aware of himself. He's never been like a big kicker, right? He's thrown a couple kicks throughout his career. Very powerful leg kicks that we saw against JDS and Curtis Blades. He's always been mainly a puncher. And his punching ability is better now than it's ever been by a long shot. The way he boxed with Tyson Fury, but he wouldn't bring a lot of that to MMA, right? A lot of the boxing technique, you can't really bring that to MMA if you want to win, that is. I still think the techniques that would work are better now than it's ever been for Francis. How he was setting off the jab, which has been mainly absent for a lot of his fights in the UFC. He displayed that in moments, like in the second Stipe fight, finding the right hand connection, pumping jabs to the body, jab up to the head. He's done this a couple times throughout his career, but what we saw in boxing had a lot more wrinkles. Body jabs especially would be a great weapon at heavyweight, since most heavies don't throw head kicks, they don't throw big knees. Ngannou has a big reach advantage, and he could time those to catch the opponent up top. Or the feints that he used against Tyson Fury, he can bring that into MMA to get the opponent to reach forward, and then he can counter them with the left hand. Ngannou did a lot of great things in the Fury fight that I would like to see him translate into MMA. Isn't it crazy? So we all remember that time where Ngannou was promoted by the UFC and Dana was talking him up so much, remember that whole thing before he fought Stipe the first time? He's that guy now. That same Francis Ngannou they were promoting back then, he became that guy. There is no one scarier than Francis Ngannou, ever. Shane Carwin wasn't, Brock Lesnar wasn't, Ubrim wasn't, Jon Jones isn't. Francis Ngannou got ranked in boxing. He's the number 10 heavyweight boxer in the world right now. I think he should definitely be higher though. I mean, look at the kind of fight he put to Tyson Fury. He should definitely be above number 10. But that's wild to see. Can you imagine the other way around if there was a boxer who was in the top 10 of the UFC rankings? So now that Ngannou is officially ranked, he is eligible to fight for the belts in boxing, which I'm pretty sure they're looking to set these up. I am surprised that Jon Anik never even mentioned divorces during the Andrade and Dern fight, knowing that both of them were coming off a divorce into their fights. And you know Jon Anik, right? Bro's always bringing up the random facts. And they both felt like they got through a divorce too. So it was like a perfect moment to mention it, and he never did. I was a little bit disappointed in Jon Anik at that point. Dern especially was just going at it. Like, she didn't even care. Throwing blows. Definitely bring back Jason Perillo and fire whoever told her to get rid of him. Divorce is a pretty big thing though, man. There are some guys that I know that have gone through divorce. It's a scary thing, man. It could really mess up your head. And I really wonder if like Dern and Andrade, I don't know how it goes between like for the women's side, right? I know the men's side, it's very scary. They really don't deal with it that well. We know about the stats and stuff like that. There's all these like podcasts, they mention you all the stats and stuff. And I think at this point, people are getting it, how bad it really is. And I know some guys who have gone through it, and it really wreck you mentally, financially, your relationship with your children. And I've gone to school for this. I went to college for psychology, and I took some courses about marriage, relationships, how the male and female brain work in that kind of dynamic. I've known a lot of the studies for a while. But the thing is, there's going to be more studies, I think, when it talks about the United States compared to the other countries. I really want to see, I don't know if they have it right now. I haven't looked it up, but a widespread global comparison from the United States to other countries, because it looks like right now in the United States, it's horrible. I can only imagine it's worse than any other country. All the guys I know that got married in the US are divorced. I know some guys that got divorced 3 times marrying women in the US. My friends, though, my close friends, none of them are married to women in the US. They're all married to women overseas on some passport bro stuff. And I swear the relationships are much better. That's the move, boys. Get your mind right, get your body right, get your money right, and start traveling. What was very shocking to see on the news was that a fighter van, a UFC fighter van, got attacked in New York by quote-unquote protesters. If they're attacking random buses and vans and stuff, are they really protesters at that point? I think they're called rioters, trying to start something in their own cities, which is something I've never really understood. Why would you destroy your own home, which is not going to change anything? It's kind of like a child throwing a temper tantrum, right? They break their own toys and stuff. You see how a child, he gets mad at something and he breaks his own toy? That's kind of what these rioters do, but in an adult context. So a fighter van got attacked in New York. The fighters that were on it were Jamahal Hill, Robbie Lawler, and Corey Sandhagen. Those 3 were on the bus with other people, of course. And Jamahal Hill was about to go crazy. There's even a video of him, you hear him getting riled up and stuff, and people are trying to calm him down. So Hill was about to go crazy, and then you have General Robbie Lawler gave that monster instruction to hold that energy for the right moment on some Yoda stuff. Robbie Lawler was containing that beast and holding him for the moment until it's ready for him to go and start throwing left hands. Why was Robbie talking like he has dreamt of this happening? But for real though, you need a friend like Robbie Lawler around. This is the kind of guy that keeps you grounded. He knows what to do in chaotic situations, because it wasn't like, oh, they shook up the van and stuff. No, they slashed the tires. Reports are saying that the windows were breaking. If you were on that van, you would feel like you were getting attacked and you'll be in fight or flight mode. You have to get ready to defend yourself. And it's awesome to see how Robbie Lawler, a veteran, was trying to contain Jamahal Hill for the right moment. Like, imagine thinking, for example, you're gonna make a difference by attacking a random van in your own home, right? You're gonna make that difference that's going to really matter. And then, from the van you attacked, 2 UFC champions walk out, throwing left hands and knocking random people out. Then you got the most unassuming, buttoned up killer, wheel kicking and kneeing fools left and right. Now, it isn't a movie, of course, these guys wouldn't be able to handle all of those people, but you have to see these protesters. You gotta see, or rioters, whatever, you gotta see how they look. You could just tell these guys would not be able to take a shot whatsoever. Oh, but Corey's unassuming. Yeah, but Corey's a real fighter. These guys are not. How many videos have we seen of these rioters causing problems and them getting, KO'd by some randoms? Then let's go right to the questions. Just like always, we're going to start with the members first, and the questions with the most likes get read first, as usual. And then let's go right to the questions. We're going to start with John Jordan. Sports like basketball or American football look much different today than they did when they first began. And MMA has already evolved in its relatively short time as a sport. How different do you think MMA will look in 10 years, 20 years, etc.? What changes do you think we might see? MMA is evolving a lot, but I think it's gotten to a point where we're not going to see a kind of evolution that we saw from 1993 to 2003, or even from 2003 to 2013. If you look at 2013 to 2023, there's a big progression that has been made, but it's not as drastic as it was before. 2003 to 2013 is a much bigger difference than 2013 to 2023. And I think 2023 to 2033 is going to be less of a change, but we're going to see more stuff out of it. Hopefully the scoring system changes. Hopefully a lot of the rules like grounded knees and 12 to 6 elbows and stuff like that get changed. And in terms of technically how the fighters look, we're going to see, of course, more well-rounded fighters. There's always going to be specialists around, but most guys are going to know everything. I think we're going to see a big change with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys finally using good wrestling. We don't see it that often. Can you imagine Mackenzie Dern and Brian Ortega knowing the double leg? It's already been happening for a few years, but we're going to see even more fighters. I think it's going to be a standard. We're going to see more fighters coming out of gyms that just teach you everything about MMA, right? Not just a specific martial art and then you go to the next and go to the next like it used to be back in the day. I think more traditional martial art techniques are going to be used back behind the basics of MMA. So I'm talking about the side kicks, different kind of front kicks, some more spinning moves, maybe using knees in different ways, such as the flying knee is going to be used a little bit more intelligently, a better feinting game than ever before, and even better fundamental boxing. I think is going to be a big difference between now and 2033. Even though there are a lot of MMA fighters that can box, there's a lot of those fundamentals missing right now. And I think we're going to see more of it. A better use of a defensive jab, better uppercuts. Uppercuts is a big difference between MMA boxing and traditional boxing. A lot of the uppercuts thrown in MMA are bolos. They're coming out from long range, and it's an all offensive technique. There is no defense to it. Your head is exposed when you throw an uppercut like that. And you look at boxing, for an example, you could look at Mike Tyson. They bring their body in behind it, and they're able to cover up as they're throwing it, but you do have to be closer to the opponent. So distance management is going to be a bit different as well, where a lot of fighters right now are excelling in long range. But I think we're going to see more fighters be much more comfortable in close range than they are right now. And you might see some of these uppercuts landing on fighters. And those are some of the differences I do see happening in the next 10 years. 20 years is very hard to imagine at that point. Everyone's going to be a ninja. Maybe everyone's going to be planted and become superhumans. I don't know. AI is going to do something, 20 years, it could be a whole different game. Hey, Weasel, love your vids, bro. They are detailed and informative. Thank you so much, man. Number 1, how do you think Islam Makhachev would do against each person in the current welterweight top 15 right now? And if he beats them, how easy is it for him or how hard is it for him? Also, if the welterweight beats Islam, how easy would that have been for that fighter? And what would be their path to victory? Okay, that's a long question. So let me see your other ones here. Do you think Volk losing to Islam affected his... Okay, I'll go through these very quickly. So Islam versus Renat. I think he overall beats Renat, and the level of difficulty will be low to mid diff, not too much. He beats Michael Chiesa, low difficulty. He beats Neil Magny, no difficulty at all. He beats Kevin Holland, low difficulty, just that right hand he has to watch out for. Even though Kevin Holland's got much better in his grappling defense, considering that he's not getting ragdolled by bigger men. I think Islam is just so much better at everything on the ground, even compared to anybody Kevin Holland's fought in the welterweight division by a long shot. Jack Della Maddalena, I think this is more of a mid-difficulty fight for Islam because Jack is bigger, he hits hard, he has great striking, Islam cannot strike with him at all, and he has solid takedown defense, but his grappling IQ is kind of low, so I do think Islam would win, but there could be some difficulty here or there, as long as the fight stays on the feet and if Jack can defend takedowns, which I don't think he'll defend all of them. I think at a certain point, Jack is going to get submitted. Ian Gary, I think this is like a low to mid difficulty, he gets out-grappled. Sean Brady, I think this is, again, like a low to mid difficulty. Islam is just better at everything. He's literally better at everything than Sean Brady. Brady's just bigger than him. Vicente Luque. This could be like another low to mid difficulty, but again gets out-grappled and eats some big shots even on the feet from Islam, who can really get him to walk into left hands and then he transitions into single legs. Jeff Neal. This is more of a mid-difficult, almost maybe even mid to high difficulty fight between that for Islam, because Jeff Neal's a big guy. He is absolutely going to outstrike Islam, and he could defend some takedowns. Even Shavkat couldn't take him to the ground, but Jeff Neal was big in that fight. He missed weight by a lot, so I think, yeah, mid to high difficulty for Islam, and I think Islam would win at the end of the day, but very tough fight. Would win at the end of the day. I do think he will eventually get him to the ground, and as soon as that happens, I think he can submit him. Wonder Boy, this is a low difficulty fight for Islam. He takes him down easily and submits him. Shavkat Rakhmonov, I would actually pick Shavkat in this. I think this is a mid to high difficulty fight for Shavkat. He's so much bigger, he's more powerful, he's very precise, he has such a long reach compared to Islam. Islam has to get in on him and he can't counter-strike, which is what he loves to do. So Islam being aggressive with his striking against a better striker, he doesn't move his head, right? Shavkat could get hit, but he's got a chin, man. He took some big shots from Jeff Neal that could put out a lot of people. At the moment, we don't know exactly how good Shavkat's takedown defense is because nobody really attempts it. Nobody wants to go to the ground with the guy, but who knows? Maybe Shavkat has bad takedown defense. I don't think so, but it could be a thing. So as of what we know right now, I would go with Shavkat. Gilbert Burns. I would actually pick Islam Makhachev in a high difficulty fight. This is a tough fight for Islam for the fact that Gilbert Burns is very dangerous on the ground, but we know that Islam can handle dangerous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grapplers like Charles Oliveira. And I think overall in the stand-up, Burns is fast, he's powerful, he's very courageous with his offense, but I think he gets countered by Islam. I think Islam overall outstrikes him. Islam cannot be underestimated on the feet anymore. Burns, he does some wild stuff out there and could definitely get countered for it. Colby Covington, I would pick Islam in a high difficulty fight. I think Colby can defend a lot of the takedowns. I think he can even give some issues to Islam in the stand-up. Honestly, not just high difficult, this is like very high difficult. It's almost 50-50. I think the main difference between the two is the fact that Islam could submit him if it goes to the ground. Whether Colby takes him down or Islam does get a takedown. We do know that RDA took Colby down before, multiple times in their fight. It was a long time ago, but we know that Islam is also a very big, strong grappler who has better takedowns, much better takedowns than RDA. But I do see most of the fight being striking, and at the end of the day, I see Islam maybe outstriking him just enough to win the decision, but it can really go either way. Bilal Muhammad, I think this is Islam's win, mid-difficulty. Bilal is well-rounded enough, crafty enough to not get absolutely destroyed. Now Kamaru Usman. I got Usman. Hamza Chimaev took Usman down on short notice in a higher weight class than Usman's never fought in before. If you want to translate those skills to Islam, who's much smaller than Hamza, he's probably like, 20 to 30 pounds lighter than Hamza. He's like 4 inches shorter. Usman's going to have the strength advantage. He's going to have the power advantage in the stand-up. And I think that power will ultimately get to Islam, knowing that Usman's never going to gas out either. So I think Usman beats Islam in a high difficulty fight. That's a tough fight for both guys. And then Leon Edwards, I would go with Islam in a mid to high difficulty fight. Leon is well-rounded. He's clearly the better striker of the two. It's going to force Islam to get in on him. But Leon hangs back so much against the fence. It's inviting Islam to shoot against the fence all day. Leon would have to game plan and drill techniques to intercept this. He's so used to it, I don't think he fights differently. Right? I think Islam is going to be the guy that pressures Leon backwards in the fight. And you know that's the worst thing when you fight a Dagestani wrestler. You never want to back up like that. And I think he gets Leon to the ground. Leon always gives up his back. And I think he's never fought a grappler like Islam before. He's fought good wrestlers like Usman, but he's never fought a complete grappler like Islam. And Islam will get his back and choke him out. Then your second question, do you think Volk losing to Islam affected his legacy to a great extent? And if Volk went on a 6-fight losing streak, what would you think and how would it affect his legacy? Yes, so Does Volk losing to Islam affect his legacy to a great extent? No, not to a great extent. He went up to a division that wasn't his own. He tried something that most people would never succeed in, and he failed. The only thing that hurts his legacy is the fact that he lost twice to him. One time is one thing, right? You can't really take anything away from the smaller guy moving up. But losing twice and then getting KO'd, okay, this is a little bit different now. It affects Volk's legacy when it comes to pound for pound rankings, I would say, and it factors into his all-time greatness, you know? But when you talk about what he's able to do in the featherweight division, it doesn't affect that at all. There is zero effect in his greatness in the featherweight division. Here's an example of, let's say you talk to someone else and you say, you know, Volkanovski is one of the greatest fighters of all time. You know what the counter argument to that always is going to be? He lost to Islam twice. Islam is greater than him. That is something you could definitely hear people say against any time you bring up how great Volkanovski is. And a lot of times you're going to have to concede maybe Islam is greater than Volk, which I don't think so right now. But see, even if I say I don't think Islam is greater than Volk right now, considering how long Volk has dominated in his division, his title defenses, competition, all of that, I can already hear people saying, yo, but Islam is greater. He beat him twice. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing you're always going to hear as a blow to Volkanovski's legacy. Now, if he goes on a 6-fight losing streak, yes, that absolutely impacts his legacy. It impacted Tony Ferguson's. Before Tony Ferguson went on that losing streak, him and Khabib were looked at as the two greatest lightweights of all time. A lot of people, if not most, saw it this way because not only can you look at the records, their winning streaks, all that stuff, but it was promoted this way too. Tony and Khabib was looked at as the two guys that were supposed to fight each other to dictate who is the greatest lightweight of all time. But now him losing 6 in a row, nobody even looks at Tony Ferguson as even like top 3, maybe not even top 5. He went from number 1 or 2 to not even in the top 5. That's a blow to Tony Ferguson's legacy because you can now say Khabib, Charles Oliveira, Islam, even Benson Henderson, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, you can say all these guys are greater than Tony Ferguson. Because as you're losing, other fighters are going to be winning. This is another big thing to it, right? If Volk goes on a 6-fight losing streak, let's say Ilia Topuria is the champion, people are going to start saying Ilia's greater than Volk. That's just how the fans look at the sport. It's always been this way. That's my opinion, at least. And then your third question, if Volk and Holloway had a 4th fight where Holloway won by a KO or a TKO, similarly to how he beat TKZ, how would you feel about Volk's legacy if that happened? And where would you place Max on featherweight GOAT list if he did that? You're really going after Volk here. Now, I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying because he just got KO'd and he could be a different fighter after that head kick, which we've seen many times before after a knockout loss. Fighters change sometimes and they can't take a shot anymore. Chuck Liddell's like one of the most famous examples of that. A guy who was known for an iron chin and then once he got KO'd, it was over for him. He was never able to recover from it. Renan Barao with more of a beating than a knockout. A long-ridden TKO, not a clean-cut knockout like that. And you can argue which one's worse. I always say like getting beat up to a pulp for 4 to 5 rounds is worse than getting KO'd. But we've seen champions suffer this kind of thing before. So if he fought Max for the 4th time, which can happen, and Max KO'd him because it seems like Max is never going to get knocked out, and he had the destructive performance against Korean Zombie, and he did the same thing to Volkanovski, you can't put Max above Volk. Because there's always going to be that Volk's not the same guy anymore. You know, of course Max is going to knock him out. We saw what happened the first 3 times they fought each other. Look what happened the 4th time as Volk declined after getting KO'd by Islam and Topuria. Now he gets KO'd by Holloway. He has 3 wins over that guy. It's obvious evidence that Volk has declined and Holloway hasn't. That's why Holloway was able to get ahead and knock him out. That would be the narrative if that knockout loss would happen. But even if it did, I can't put Max above Volk because Volk has 3 wins over him. They both have a lot of title defenses. They both beat great fighters, great competition between the two. The biggest difference maker is that Volk beat him 3 times and Holloway beats him once. Don't think about the difference in their weight class. Just pretend these fighters are all in the same weight. Let's say everybody in this list is in the 170 pound weight class. Conor McGregor versus Sean Strickland. Who wins and why? I never really like size parity hypotheticals because it changes everything. The fighters, if they were different weights, they wouldn't fight the same, right? Demetrius Johnson is a heavyweight, does not fight like Demetrius Johnson. He just doesn't have the physical capability to fight like that, right? He's not going to be as quick and rely on that kind of speed and be as flexible and nimble and have the same kind of reflexes and all this stuff. A lot of things change when you have a smaller body or if you have a bigger body. So if Conor and Strickland fought at 170 and let's say the weight cut was normal, like they didn't get destroyed by their weight cut, I would have to go Sean Strickland. He would be Nate Diaz on steroids compared to Conor McGregor. He's so much of a better boxer than Nate is. He puts on a lot of volume, has much better pressure than Nate does. Conor would crack him early and hurt him, but I think as the fight rides out, Strickland's going to be piecing him up until maybe even a 5th round TKO. Jorge Masvidal versus Michael Chandler. I would like to say Jorge if he doesn't get KO'd in the first 2 rounds, but he might get KO'd in the first 2 rounds. But I think Jorge overall, he's a better technical striker. He's smarter out there. He has decent takedown defense, good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu defense. He will be able to get up, and Chandler's going to gas out. Kamaru Usman versus Dricus. Right now, I would definitely go with Dricus. I think he could get the fight to the ground eventually. I mean, they are the same weight in this hypothetical, so it's kind of tough to take down Usman when you're the same size as him. They're both not too technical when it comes to boxing, but I do think Dricus is much more intelligent than people give him credit for. Like, he was able to pinpoint that jab to counter Robert Whittaker. If he can find something similar to Kamaru Usman, he does vary a lot more in his striking than Usman, right? Usman's much more of a boxer who drops his hands routinely, and I think Dricus could catch him over those. If Dricus gets Usman to the ground, he could really get Usman in some bad positions, land big ground and pound shots. So I do think if Dricus does not gas out, he would win this fight. I still would like to see Dricus go 5 rounds. He just finishes his fights all the time, so it's hard to really tell how good his cardio actually is for 5. Bo Nickel versus Shavkat. Right now, Shavkat annihilates Bo Nickel. Like, that's not even close. Bo Nickel is going to thrive in the middleweight division because barely anybody can wrestle. Shavkat can wrestle, and he's very good on the ground too, and he's a way better striker. We do have to see Shavkat's takedown defense to know for sure though. Yeah, Bo Nickel's out of his element fighting Shavkat right now. Conor McGregor versus Wonder Boy. Definitely Wonder Boy. You're going to have a striking match with Wonder Boy? Good luck with that. At this point, there's like barely anybody I see beating Wonder Boy without attempting takedowns. Conor could get Wonder Boy to the ground if he goes that direction, but I don't see him holding him down at all. Conor's left hand is going to be the biggest thing, and a guy on Wonder Boy's caliber, he's going to see that thing, man. He's going to know exactly when it's going to come. If you look at the Darren Till fight, for an example, he got his knee injured, which really hurt his movement, hurt his ability to put more weight onto his punches when he hit Darren Till and get away from that left hand, especially in that 5th round, I believe, where he got dropped. That was a learning experience for Wonder Boy. He's going to see those low side kicks coming now from a guy like Conor who does throw those. He's adapted to this. So like during this time, Conor didn't really learn too much after 2016. Wonder Boy learned a lot during that stretch. So a lot of the stuff that Conor uses is going to be something that Wonder Boy's already seen and had to deal with before. So I think Wonder Boy moves away from the left hands, counters Conor McGregor, out-kicks him for the most part, landing good head kicks, good side kicks to the body, pushing him away. The switching his stances, if he goes into southpaw, it's really going to throw off Conor's left hand, and he's going to get out-jabbed from a distance. The only thing that Wonder Boy has to watch out for is when he blitzes in to not get countered, because Conor is still one of the best in the world at doing that. Conor versus Darren Till, who would win and why if they're in the same weight class? Obviously Conor McGregor. Darren Till's like the proper 12 version of Conor. I'm just kidding. I never even had that drink. Is it actually good? Conor McGregor versus Alex Pereira. Really? Do I even have to say? Conor's leg would have to get amputated. Michael Chandler versus Jamahal Hill. I would go Jamahal Hill. He's just way too intelligent and dangerous on the feet. Chandler could get him down, but Jamal's takedown defense is not bad at all, and then beats him in the long haul. Hamza Chimaev versus Khabib. I'd have to go with Khabib. Hamza slows down. Khabib does not. Khabib may not be as technical in the stand-up, but he's very effective with what he throws out there, and he has much better reflexes. He has much better defense. I think he's able to pace himself a lot better, showing higher fight IQ, and the longer the fight goes, the easier Khabib can get Hamza to the ground and beat him up. Then we go to Pop-Tart. Hey Weasel, love the podcast. Do you think people start the questions with, hey Weasel, love the podcast, just so you're more likely to feature their comment? I don't think so, because it doesn't help them get picked. Questions are ordered by likes. For now, that would have to do until they start calling me Lord Weasel. Then those are the only questions I would answer from then on, obviously. Then we go to official Hakure Reimu. Aspinall said he'll probably fight Pavlovich again in the future, and then Pavlovich will continue to knock people out. Do you agree, and how do you rate Pavlovich's chances against the likes of Gane and Almeida? I do imagine these two will fight each other again. Pavlovich is still one of the best heavyweights, and he can still knock out the likes of Curtis Blades, who's still one of the top contenders. I think he can knock out Almeida. I think he can knock out Volkov, Stipe even. There's a lot of guys you can still knock out. Does he change as a fighter from the knockout loss to Aspinall? He's young enough where I don't think that would happen to him, but you never really know about a fighter's ability to take punches like that. Now, how does he do against Gane and Almeida? I think Gane beats him. Pavlovich has hinted at his ability to wrestle. We haven't seen it in the UFC at all. If he can wrestle, he can beat Ciryl Gane, but what I saw from the Tom Aspinall fight shows to me that he would probably never touch Ciryl Gane. I think Ciryl Gane would be way too fast, get in and out, hitting him some good big shots, making him miss, as he has the best footwork out there, man. and he's just as fast as Aspinall is, while also being a bit longer. I think Aspinall has a 78-inch reach, Gane has an 81-inch reach, and Gane kicks a lot too. Could get him into trouble with some of the long punches from Pavlovich. If Pavlovich can time those well, I do think Ciryl Gane would beat Sergei Pavlovich. Heavyweight division though, anyone could get knocked out at any point, but I do think more chances are that Gane outstrikes Pavlovich and gets like a mid-round TKO. And then as for Almeida, I think Pavlovich knocks Almeida out. For some reason, even though I haven't seen it yet, I think Pavlovich is so big and strong, and of course he's going to expect what the one-dimensional Almeida would do. Front kick the double leg, hold you on top, all that stuff. Pavlovich is absolutely going to know how to drill against someone like Almeida's style, and I think he would be able to get up and find that big shot, knocking Almeida out. People don't know about Pavlovich, I've mentioned it before, but he's gone 5 rounds before the UFC. And at least logically, his cardio has to have gotten better since that. They'll go to Bangladesh. Seeing the level the sport has reached, is being a double champion the highest accolade a fighter can currently achieve? I mean, technically 3 division, 4 division, stuff like that, that's not happened yet. But yes, I would say double champion is a very high accolade at the moment because it's so much harder to do it now than it was before. Is it the highest? No. I think defending your belt multiple times is much harder than winning the belt in the next division. Depending on who the opponent is, though. That's what's really going to matter here. Like, the argument against that whole narrative, because GSP said the same thing, right? GSP said defending your belt through a long time is harder than winning 2 belts in different divisions. The only thing that could go against that is Volkanovski's example. Volk was able to defend his belt a lot, but then when he went up to 155, he lost. But nobody at 145 beat him. So that's like an example of, I guess, a counter to that narrative. But I think generally speaking, it's true for most champions. Islam is a different kind of level. So I don't hold the same opinion as strong as I did before, because I was agreeing with GSP when he was talking about it. And the guy did it, right? He won 2 belts in different divisions and he defended his belt for a long time. And we do know in his example that him defending his belt that many times was much harder for him than going up and beating Michael Bisping at 185, even coming off a long hiatus. But Volkanovski proved a bit of that wrong. So it's hard to really tell exactly which one is harder, because Islam is a much better fighter, much harder fight than Michael Bisping, respectively. Adesanya's a different kind of case because he went up against a guy who can wrestle. You know, that was a different stylistic fight, whereas Volkanovski fought good grapplers, good wrestlers, good strikers at 145, and then went up and fought a well-rounded opponent like Islam, just like the other well-rounded guys he's fought at 145, and he lost. Let's look at all the champions right now, because at this point, I don't know which one's harder. What would be harder for Alex Pereira? Would him defending his belt, let's say, at light heavyweight against Jamahal Hill, Ankalaev, Rock Hitch, and let's say a Jiri rematch, is beating those 5 guys harder than going up and beating Tom Aspinall one time? Which one would be harder for Alex Pereira? They're both quite difficult, mainly because of the styles of Tom Aspinall and Ankalaev, because those 2 guys can take him down and finish him. Let's say Sean Strickland. Would it be harder for Strickland to defend against Dricus, Cannonier, Hamzat, Whitaker, and let's say he gets a rematch with Adesanya? Would that be harder than him beating Alex Pereira one time? In this case, I would say Sean Strickland defending his belt 5 times would be more difficult than beating Alex Pereira. Would it be harder for Leon Edwards to defend against Colby Covington, Bilal Muhammad, Shavkat Rakhmonov than beating Sean Strickland one time? I think for Leon Edwards, defending his belt against those guys is harder than beating Sean Strickland. Now, Islam Makhachev. Would it be harder for Islam to defend his belt against Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, and let's say Dustin Poirier than beating Leon Edwards? I would say yes. Him beating Oliveira, Justin, and Dustin, all three of them, then beating Leon once. Would it be harder for Sean O'Malley to defend his belt against Chito, Merab, Sterling again, and Corey Sandhagen than beating Alexander Volkanovski one time? I think he's in the worst position out of all of them, because defending his belt that many times against those guys and the option of beating Volkanovski, like, both of those are extremely difficult for Sean O'Malley, which I don't think he would pull it off either which way. But I would think defending his belt against those guys is tougher than beating Volkanovski. Merab is a nightmare of a style for him. Corey's a very dangerous fight for him. A rematch with Aljamain can also be tough. Even the Chito fight is probably not going to be easy for him. But then again, he probably gets destroyed by Volk. But he could catch Volk. This one I don't really know what to think about. For Pantoja, would it be harder for Pantoja to defend his belt against Royval, Elbazi, Kai Kara France, and let's say Manel Kep than beating Sean O'Malley? Absolutely. Yes, I would say him defending his belt 5 times against those guys is much harder than beating Sean O'Malley. I mean, obviously the Grasso case is going to be harder for her to defend her belt. I mean, bantamweight is so lackluster. Zhang Weili. Would it be harder for Zhang Weili to defend her belt against Yang Xiaonan, Tatiana Suarez, and let's say Andrade again than beating Alexa Grasso? I would say yes. Beating those fighters is tougher for her than beating Alexa Grasso. So overall, I would say for most champions, defending your belt multiple times is harder than winning the belt in the next weight class, but there are a few examples where it's the other way around. It just depends on the styles. It depends on the kind of fighters there are. Then we go to Amatia Rakshasa. Why was Almeida struggling to implement any ground and pound from full mount when he fought Derek Lewis? What could he have done different technically or from a cardio perspective? Was it Lewis's strength that made him focus on holding position rather than ground and pound? Same question for sub attempts. Thanks, Weasel, for the amazing analysis as always. No problem, man. Why was he struggling with ground and pound? Because he just doesn't know how to do it or something? Like, I don't understand. He has so many moments where he could have landed elbows and big shots, and there was that big debate even while the fight was going on. That's how boring the fight was. That the commentators rather debate with each other about whether ground and pound can be landed or not there. Dominic Cruz and DC were really arguing as to whether Almeida should ground and pound or not. And the answer is yes. He could have absolutely threw more shots and make Derek Lewis give up positions than just laying on his back, where obviously Almeida could not finish him from there. If he could, he would have, unless he just liked riding on top of Derek Lewis for 25 minutes. He could have done so many things differently in this. When Derek Lewis is grabbing onto his wrists, Almeida could have turned those over for elbows. He could have just literally threw punches. There was nothing Lewis was doing. If you ever trained before and they have like the heavy bag on the ground for you to ground and pound it, that's what Derek Lewis was. He was flat on his back doing nothing. I could imagine that Lewis's strength may have got him more focused on holding position than, risking with ground and pound, but ground and pound does not have to be risky. He had like 20 minutes on top of this guy. At some point, he has to know, okay, Derek Lewis is not doing too much here. I got a lot of openings. I don't have to go crazy and look for a finish throwing 20 punches at him. I could throw one big one and then see what his reaction is. I could throw 2 then, see what his reaction is. There's a level of fight IQ here that Almeida was not performing at. Right? You don't have to go all Habib on him. You don't have to beat his head into the mat, but you could throw like one big shot. One big shot can really change a lot, especially in the heavyweight division. And the thing is, there were times where he landed big shots on Derek Lewis and it forced Lewis to give up openings. That's what a lot of grapplers are looking for. That's why the term is a big thing for grapplers. Sub attempts could be a bit risky. It depends on what he's going for. Right, I can understand why he didn't go for a lot of submissions, but the ground and pound you can absolutely do so without giving up his positions. He did go for that one arm triangle choke, and Derek Lewis is too big, right? It's hard to pull a move like that off on a bigger opponent than you. There's probably like 40 to 50 pounds of difference between those two guys. Then we get to Pedro Correa. With all the dominant champs being finished recently, Usman, Izzy, Sterling, Volk, will we never see champions as dominant as GSP Silva and Jones? Also, who will eventually chin Islam, Weili, and Volk at 145? With how fast the sport is progressing, I don't think we'll ever see a champion on that level again. Because during GSP Silva and Jones' time, there were definitely several fighters that were high level, but a lot of them were not high level for that moment, right? We'll talk about Jones, right? Like GSP, for example. GSP defended his belt against Thiago Alves, Dan Hardy, Matt Hughes was the previous generation, BJ Penn, the previous generation, and a lightweight. That's like half of his title defenses right there. But you do have good fighters that he did go up against, like Johnny Hendricks, like Carlos Condit, like Jake Shields. Then you look at Anderson Silva. Most of Anderson Silva's title defenses were not at a high level. Yushin Okami, Telis Latis, Patrick Cote, Damian Maia back then, who was truly a welterweight. Travis Lutter, a lot of these guys were not at that high level yet. But he did fight guys like Vitor and Dan Henderson, so there were a few definitely. Now, Jon Jones is a very different kind of case. Jones fought high-level fighters throughout most of his title run, but half of those guys were previous generation fighters like Rampage, Rashad, Lyoto, etc. Like a lot of these guys were very, very good, but they were the previous generation at the time. Whereas that was not the case for Silva and GSP. Silva and GSP, most of the guys they fought were their generation or the one after. For Jones, almost half of his title defenses were against the previous generation. But although I would say those previous generation guys were very high level, and then he did fight guys like Gustafsson in his prime, DC. Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, and Dominic Reyes, I guess those are lower level guys, but because they were of Jones' generation and the one after, they proved to be more difficult fights for Jones, and he probably didn't take those fights as seriously. So Jones is a different kind of case. Like, look at Volkanovski, right? Volkanovski is the best example, as well as Usman, as the longest reigning champions of this generation. Volk fought Max Holloway 3 times, Brian Ortega in his prime, Yair Rodriguez in his prime. Korean Zombie is not on the same level because he was so much older. Those are high-level fighters that he fought. And then look at Usman, who fought Colby Covington twice, high-level fighter. He fought Gilbert Burns, high-level fighter. Whatever you want to say about Jorge, I think Jorge at the time was pretty good. Then he fought Leon Edwards, high-level fighter. You know what I'm saying? You look at Aljamain Sterling, who fought Pietro Yan, Henry Cejudo. TJ's a high-level fighter, but he was coming in with one arm. You look at Adesanya, who fought Whitaker, high-level fighter. He fought Sean Strickland, high-level. Alex Pereira, high-level. Jared Cannonier's high-level. Paulo Costa, maybe. Romero, high-level. You know, Costa did beat Romero, so technically I guess you can say Costa as well. Adesanya went through a load of really good fighters. So those are the title runs these days. And like 90% of their competition as a champion are high-level guys compared to before. So that's why I do think it's a harder road to get those title defenses like before. Now, eventually, who will chin Islam, Weili, and Volk at 145? If there is someone to do it, the guy that would knock out Islam would be Charles Oliveira. For Weili, if someone could do it, the fighter that would knock her out, I guess Tatiana could TKO her with ground and pound. I guess Yan Xiaonan is the fighter that could do it the best, but she doesn't knock out really anybody. For Volkanovski, it would be Topuria, until Volk gets so old and just doesn't retire and gets chinned by a lot of guys. And then we go to Ad Astra Stake Pool. Hey Weez, we've seen the sport be dominated by certain styles for over decades, from Gracie-style BJJ in the 90s to Coleman-esque American wrestling, to now it seems like Dagestani-style wrestling is carving itself into the MMA history books. What cultural fighting style would you like to see next find its way into the MMA cage? Cheers, Weez. What cultural fighting style? It's hard to ever predict these kind of things because I don't think anybody thought that Dagestani wrestling was going to be the next big thing. Or even in the 90s, I don't think people believed that Coleman's ground and pound wrestling style was going to be dominant. But what kind of style would I like to see next? Not the grappling arts, man. I'd rather see striking. A good style of sprawl and brawl without the brawl. So like stopping takedowns and keeping it on the feet. That sort of thing. So a lot more of wrestling defense and the ability to get up from the bottom. That's what I like to see a lot more. And then we'll go to survival tips and tricks. With this loss to Alex, who do you see Jiri fighting next and who makes sense for Alex's first title defense? I think Alex's first title defense will be against Rakic if he beats Jan Blachowicz, or it could even be the winner of Ankalaev and Walker. I'm leaning more to that because Rakic is coming back from a long layoff. And if he beats Jan, is that enough to give him a title shot? It's hard to really say, so I think the pick would be Ankalaev and Walker. The winner of that fight goes up against Alex Pereira. And then maybe Jiri Prochazka can get the winner of Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic as the number one contender fight. And then finally, we're going to go to Ilya Sergeyev. Hey Weasel, can you share some details about your current training regime? We'd love to hear about your current progress in MMA. Keep up the good work. I've slowed down quite a bit. I'm not training too often these days. Sometimes I go to local gyms, different kinds, just to get a different feeling. I'll do that like a couple times a week, and then I'll do some stuff at home, and that's pretty much it. I still do quite a bit of footwork drills. I love to do footwork drills. It's actually always been my favorite part of training. Creating angles on a heavy bag, using the quick ladder steps. I'll do sometimes the way that like American football players use them, but I'll also do it with actual martial arts stances, moving in and out, creating angles for those steps. I'll do it both in orthodox and southpaw, and I usually give myself like 10 to 20 minutes. So that's one thing I'll do at home. When I'm at the gym, I'm just doing whatever they're telling me, drilling different kind of techniques, whatever they're doing, I'm just there for it, and I'll light spar. That's pretty much all I do at the gym. At home, I have my own kind of thing, so I do the footwork stuff. I try different kind of combinations on the bag, or if I saw something in a fight, I'll drill those on a heavy bag to feel those kind of techniques and how to throw them, what feels natural, what doesn't, what can I add to this. A combo I've been working on, and it generates a lot of power because of the kind of leverage you're able to throw with it, punching across your body, kind of how Conor McGregor did. I don't know if you need a certain kind of body type in order to pull this off better, but for an example, like what I will do is, from orthodox, I'll throw the right straight at the bag and hide behind my shoulder, weaving to my right side. So I'm moving behind my right shoulder and stepping off far out to that right side. Kind of envisioning me getting under an opponent's counterpunch And from there, I'm able to throw the left hook into a right straight across my own body as the target is on my left side. You have to do this in like a seamless motion. If you get the rhythm and motion down correctly, you generate an incredible amount of power in that final right hand. Or you could do it the opposite. If you're a lefty and you're more used to southpaw, you could do it the other way around. So throw the left straight, stepping out, weaving to your left side behind your shoulder to find that right hook into a left straight. And it's a pretty safe technique to use once you get yourself on the outside, right? Once you're there, you're pretty safe. To get there, when you're throwing that first cross, that's where it could be kind of risky. If you're going to try this in sparring, you'll see exactly what I mean. It's all based on timing to surprise your opponent or counter their own punch, getting under and on the outside of their counter, and from there, smooth sailing for your 2-punch combo. That's one example of something I've picked out from sparring, and I'm using it on the bag to generate as much power as I can, keep it in the most perfect form possible. I also just try to keep flexibility with my kicks. So I'll be throwing question mark kicks, hook kicks, a bunch of stuff just to keep myself flexible, that sort of thing. So that's pretty much my current training regime at this point. And that's ultimately the end of the episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to give this a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.